Hello and welcome back to Delgado's Adult Ed, ESL Level 3-4. This is our final week together for session 1, so we're just going to do a quick review so you'll have plenty to talk about with your teachers. So we've had several different themes and a lot of different learning objectives. On top of that, we've had a big group of vocabulary. So the first thing we want to do is have you look over the list of the vocabulary words and say to yourself, can you use them in a sentence? Do you know what those words mean? Can you match them to an image? Right? So here's the words from the first 2 weeks. Just kind of look at them, put the video on pause if you need to. And then maybe you might use them if you think about time, for instance, when you think about this kid, right? So how often does this kid work? Does he work 24 hours in a day? Does he work 52 weeks a year? Does he work part-time or full-time, overtime? When did he start working? So he has been working since when, right? Maybe we'll also ask yourself, does he take online classes? He might. Does he post comments in the chat stream? Talk about it with your friends, right? All right, these are the words for week 3 and week 4. And so we have 2 guys sitting in a very fancy room here. This is like a very, very fancy bank. And what do you think they're doing? Are they applying for jobs? Are they making deposits? What sort of assets are around them? What sort of assets do they possess personally? Right? I would like to possess this table. This is a beautiful table. Right? Use it and the items in the picture to generate some sentences to share them with your classmates. There's also this picture here that might spark some talking. So what's going on in this photo? Do you think someone made a deposit or a withdrawal? What sort of workers will be involved in this situation? How did they get their jobs? Will any interviews be conducted? I don't know. What do you think? All right, for weeks 5 and 6, we had a bunch more words. So there's a variety here, and some of them have to do with community, and some of them have to do more with the criminal system, right? So who are these people? Do you think they work for an organization? Are they part of a community? If they do work for an organization, does their organization make a lot of money? If it doesn't, how is it funded? Right? Talk about that. What do you think you can tell just by looking at these photos? And then here we have a reenactment of a scene from a museum. And we would say, well, what is he asking the woman? Do you think this woman will need an alibi? Are secret police part of your community? I don't know. The guy in the photo, he was the big guy in the secret police. You'll look into that, a little history lesson. All right, on top of all of that vocabulary, we also just had stuff that you probably already know from back in the day. But look it over, use it in sentences, change the verbs, make them past tense, future tense, present tense, whatever you would like to do. Talk about, do I do them regularly? Do I do them occasionally? And then there's also for you here some activities, like a fill in the blank. I'll run through that real quick so you won't see the answers. And then another fill in the blank using at, on, or in, or a go. And I know that you guys have always talking about that with your teachers. And then there's that last one was tell the time using quarter past, half past, or midnight or noon, some of those time words. All right, the next thing that we did was verb tenses. So we want to use different verbs to create sentences using the different tenses. Just as a reminder, this session we covered past continuous, which is an action that took a while to complete, that an action that had a beginning and an end point, that both of those things occurred in the past. So I was eating lunch. Between your first bite and your last bite, that whole time you were eating. right? We also talked about present perfect continuous tense. So that shows the action that started in the past and is still currently happening. And then, so I have been dancing since I was a child, right? So I still dance now. It's been happening for some period of time. And then the last thing that we covered was using present and future tense in the same sentence. And most of the time, this will create a complex sentence. And many times we use the word if in this sort of a setup. So we say, if the weather is nice, we will go to swimming. The first one part of the sentence is dependent upon the other part of the sentence, right? So just as a quick review, when you're using these different tenses, you do have to pay attention to your helping verbs and whether or not they should be singular or plural. And also always remember that when you use the future tense, you don't have to add the s's to your base verbs, right? That will, that helping verb, it does it all for you. All right, so this is just the first bit, some examples, and as usual, we're not going to read this slide to you, but if you do look at the verbs, you can see we start with the base verb grow, and then it becomes have or has been growing, grew for past tense, was or were growing for past continuous, and will grow for future tense. So we just have some other words here. The first verb is swim. Try to use this to create your own sentences that show that time, you know, that show when something was happening, right? And then we have another one here, which is save. So save, has, have been saving, saved, was or were saving, and will save. And please make some sentences for that. Then the last thing that we covered in this class was commas in complex sentences. So look at the sentences that you wrote in the previous section and say to yourself, do they need commas, right? Like go back here after you write your sentences and look at them. If it's a complex sentence that begins with the adverb, remember you will need the comma. But if your connecting adverb is in the middle of the sentence, you won't need the comma, right? That's the rule, okay? And if you're not sure if the sentence you wrote is a complex sentence, it will one part will be dependent upon the other part, right? So if the weather is nice, we will go swimming. If the weather is not nice, we will not go swimming, right? The second part of the sentence depends on what happens in the first part, right? Okay, so here's the last little activity here. This one is you have the clauses. So you have the beginning part of your sentence and the end part. Which two pieces go together, right? Do those before you go to class so that you're you can talk about it with your classmates. So, and then the last thing that we covered was could, would, or should. We actually covered this at the very beginning of the class, right? And so read those definitions over to yourself. We won't read them for you, but let's look at the following situations and we'll kind of say, what would you do? What could you do? Or maybe what should you do, right? So if you see a house on fire, what should you do, right? Would you run into the house? Could you put it out by yourself? Probably not. Let's look at a big fire, right? So could, should, and would, they're conditional verbs, right? You really have to think about, well, it depends. It depends on the situation. It depends on a lot of scenarios and factors, right? So if you saw this baby carriage, no mother, what would you do? Would you be concerned? Should you do something? Should you leave it alone? What do you think? And then the last one, if you were, I think some people might know where this actually is, but if you were in a very, what do you think this lady in black would do if someone tried to mess with someone else? I don't know. She has a gun, right? So what would you do if you were in this line? Could you jump ahead of other people? Should you jump ahead of other people? Right? Would you make a large withdrawal or a small withdrawal? Would you deposit money in the ATM? What would you do? All right, so talk about those with your teacher and your classmates. Enjoy your classes. We are going to have a small intercession. All of your teachers should be in contact with you about the exact timing for your class. But while we are not having regular classes, we will have some opportunities to meet new students in large conversation classes that will be hosted over between in the first weeks of August, right? And then we'll be back to class on, I believe, the 14th. So if you have not already filled out your scheduling form, please do that. Everybody must fill out a scheduling form to get a schedule for next session. And thanks y'all so much for being with us all this time.